At Christmas dinner, they introduced me as the embarrassment who got arrested once. Cousin Joe mumbled, "That was the family low." I nodded quietly. But when the chief of police raised his glass and said, "She took a bullet for me," everyone sat up straight. "You really want to go in there?" Lily asked, pulling her coat tighter. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the worry underneath. "I need to," I said, staring at the old brick house I used to know like the back of my hand. For me. Christmas dinner. The first one since my name got cleared. They still think I'm the black sheep who got arrested during a domestic dispute with my ex. Only a handful of people know what really happened. That I worked undercover with the police to help bring down a corruption ring. That I got shot doing it. That I saved the life of the chief of police. But none of that mattered to my family. Not until that night, when the door opened and the chief walked in. I haven't posted on Reddit before, but I've read enough stories here to know this one probably fits in the "you can't make this stuff up" category. I'm not looking for validation or pity. I just want to share something heavy that's been sitting on my chest for too long. My name's Harper. I'm 38. Divorced. Single mom to a teenager who has more grace and wisdom in her little finger than most people in my family have in their entire bodies. This story takes place in suburban Pittsburgh, specifically, Shaler Township. Not glamorous, but home. Growing up, I was always the sensitive one. I cried at sad commercials. I stood up for the kid getting browbeat. I forgave too easily. My sister Jenna was the firecracker, opinionated, direct, fiercely loyal. Our family gatherings were the usual blend of nostalgia and repressed tension. Everyone played a role. Aunt Rosemary was the matriarch, sharp-tongued and steely-eyed. Uncle Lou was the silent type, who probably hadn't formed a full sentence since the early 2000s. Cousin Joe was the sarcastic one, always a bit too eager to roast someone to mask his own failings. And then there was me. The embarrassment. 3 Christmases ago, I was arrested in front of my daughter. It was humiliating. Painful. And worst of all, it wasn't even the full truth. They said it was a domestic dispute. That I'd lost control during an argument with Trevor, my now ex-husband. But what actually happened was much darker, and it started unraveling months before that arrest. Trevor had always been charming in public. He knew how to work a room. People, especially my family, loved him. He'd play Santa at the family Christmas party. Show up with wine. Help clean up. Say the right things. Behind closed doors, it was another story. He was controlling. Manipulative. Gaslighting me for years. I ignored the signs for too long, brushing off his financial secrecy, the calls he'd take in the garage, the late nights working. But it all started crashing down when I found a folder tucked away behind our furnace. Bank statements. Property documents. Names I didn't recognize. Cash deposits that didn't make sense. When I confronted him, I barely recognized the man in front of me. He flipped. Said I was crazy. Accused me of trying to ruin him. He threw the papers in the fireplace before I could stop him. 2 days later, I was arrested. He called the cops on me, said I attacked him. Claimed I was mentally unstable. And the worst part? My family believed him. Aunt Rosemary called my sister and said I needed help. That she'd always known I was too emotional. Cousin Joe made a joke on Facebook about holiday drama queens. No one asked me for my side of the story. Except one person. Chief Alan Forsyth. He was there that night, not in uniform but visiting his brother who lived 2 doors down. He watched the arrest from his porch. Something about it didn't sit right with him. A week later, I walked into the station to try and explain my side, get a protective order, file a complaint, anything. I didn't expect anyone to listen. But Chief Forsyth did. He sat with me for almost 2 hours, asking questions, writing things down. He never once interrupted. Just listened. That's how it started. What followed were nearly 2 years of quiet, careful work. He couldn't launch a full investigation without drawing attention. Trevor had connections, but he started poking around. One tip led to another. I handed over what I could: receipts, odd phone numbers, statements I'd managed to screenshot. We built something, slowly, behind the scenes. In public, I kept my head down. I lost friends. I had to move out of the house. I took a night job at a diner just to keep the lights on. My daughter Lily, God, she was my rock. Never once doubted me. My sister Jenna believed me too. She stood by me when no one else did. She showed up to every court hearing, every police meeting, every awkward family brunch where I was treated like a leper. Fast forward to 6 months ago. Chief Forsyth called me to meet him in Brookline. Said there was one last piece of the puzzle. I didn't ask questions. I just showed up. The building was a fake front, a real estate office that never had a client. Inside, there were records of illegal deals, laundering trails, payments made to and from Trevor's accounts. I don't remember everything that happened next. There was yelling. Someone pulled a firearm. A shot fired. I felt a sharp burn across my shoulder and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Chief Forsyth was there. "You saved my life," he said, gripping my hand. "You didn't even flinch. You just moved." Trevor was arrested that night, this time for real. Not just for domestic torment, but for fraud, bribery, racketeering, and obstruction. And yet, my family didn't say a word. Not even after the charges went public. Not after the news picked it up. Not after the reporters stopped calling. They didn't say anything when I was cleared. Which brings us to last Christmas. Jenna convinced me to come. "It's been years," she said. "They need to see you. Really see you." I wasn't convinced. But Lily was going, and I didn't want her to face them alone. So I walked into that house, the same one I grew up in, with my heart in my throat. I was expecting cold shoulders. I was prepared for silence. I wasn't prepared for the mockery. Aunt Rosemary barely acknowledged me. Cousin Joe raised a glass and said, "And this is Harper, our family embarrassment. Remember that time she got arrested for domestic violence? Ah, the good old days." Everyone laughed. Even Uncle Lou gave a sad chuckle. I didn't respond. Just nodded. What could I say? That it wasn't true? That Trevor had manipulated the whole thing? That I'd spent 2 years helping take down a criminal ring that had infiltrated city politics? They wouldn't believe me. But then the front door opened. And everything changed. The sound of the door creaking open sliced through the dining room noise. Everyone looked up. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. Even Aunt Rosemary turned her head, eyebrows lifted in disapproval at the unexpected interruption. It was Chief Alan Forsyth. Still broad-shouldered in his charcoal wool coat, hair damp from the snow. He looked like he belonged in a different room, a courtroom maybe, not my aunt's formal dining room with the lace runners and crystal napkin holders. But his eyes went straight to me, and a half-smile tugged at his face. "Sorry to intrude," he said, his voice calm, warm. "Harper, I hope I'm not too late." No one spoke. You could practically hear Aunt Rosemary's blood pressure rising. He took a few steps forward, nodding politely at the stunned table of relatives, who now looked more like museum statues than people. Joe's hand was frozen mid-toast, mouth slightly open, as if waiting for a punchline. "I heard there was a Christmas gathering," Chief Forsyth said, looking around. "And I thought it was time I thanked someone. Publicly." My throat tightened. I wasn't sure if I should stand or run. He raised his glass, a simple tumbler of something amber-colored, maybe whiskey. "This woman," he said, nodding toward me, "is one of the bravest people I've ever met. She risked her life, literally, to help my department bring down a major criminal network. A network we had been tracking for over 3 years. She never asked for recognition. She never even asked to be believed. The silence was painful. Eyes darted between him and me like people watching a tennis match no one knew they were attending. She took a bullet meant for me, he said simply. She saved my life. A slow, almost imperceptible breath left Aunt Rosemary's lips. It was Joe who broke the silence. He lowered his glass with an awkward clink and mumbled, "She took a bullet?" Alan nodded. Yes. And if not for her, several officers might not have made it home that night. Including myself. He let that hang in the air for a moment, like he knew the weight it carried. I just wanted you to know who she really is. Then, with one final glance around the room, he turned to me. Merry Christmas, Harper. And then he was gone. The door shut behind him softly. The clink of the glass he left on the sideboard was the only sound left. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Aunt Rosemary cleared her throat. Loudly. A sharp little sound like a disapproving teacher snapping her fingers. Well, she said. That was unexpected. Jenna was the first to speak. Her tone was dry, sharp. Unexpected? That man just said Harper saved his life. And you're still sitting there like someone told you your Jell-O mold collapsed. Cousin Joe pushed his chair back. He looked embarrassed, like someone who just realized the joke was on him. You never said it was that serious, he muttered. I did, I said, quietly. You just didn't listen. He didn't respond. None of them did. Later, people tried to make small talk. Uncle Lou asked how Lily was doing in school. Aunt Rosemary complimented my sweater. Jenna rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck in her skull. I didn't play along. I was too tired. Too done. It's weird. You spend so long wanting people to believe you, to finally admit they were wrong. But when it happens, it doesn't feel like victory. It just feels hollow. Like reclaiming something you never should have lost in the first place. After dinner, I stepped outside for air. The snow had picked up, flakes dancing under the glow of the porch light. I stood at the edge of the driveway, hands buried in my coat pockets, staring at the cracks in the pavement. Lily joined me a minute later. She didn't say anything, just slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head on my shoulder. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I thought I would be. But I don't know. Do you feel like they see you now? I looked through the window into the warm room, watching the silhouettes of people laughing too loudly, probably about something trivial. No, I said. Not really. But I'm starting to see myself. And maybe that's what mattered more. We stayed there a while, watching the snow pile up, the sky glowing orange from the reflection of the city below. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I hadn't realized until then how long I'd been holding my breath. How heavy everything had become, years of silence, lies, and pretending. For the first time in a long time, I exhaled. Jenna came out a few minutes later, balancing 2 steaming mugs. I figured you'd need something warm, she said, handing one to me, the other to Lily. The porch was quiet, save for the low hum of wind sweeping through the pine trees that lined Aunt Rosemary's backyard. The light from inside flickered against the frosted windows, casting faint, dancing shadows across the snow-covered yard. I took a sip. It was peppermint tea. Just like she used to make when we were kids and one of us got sick. Familiar. Soothing. I knew he'd come, Jenna said, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. Alan. He called me yesterday. I looked at her sideways. You knew he was going to show up? He asked if it would be okay. I said it would be more than okay. I told him it was overdue. I didn't know how to feel about that. Grateful, maybe. Or raw. Or both. It's strange how something can settle in your bones and still surprise you when it finally breaks free. Inside, someone had turned up the music, Bing Crosby crooning White Christmas like this was any other cozy family get-together. But nothing about this night had been normal. Nothing about the past 3 years had been. Jenna leaned against the porch rail. You didn't have to come here tonight, you know. Not for them. I know, I said. But I needed to come for me. I wasn't looking for an apology. That was something I'd long given up on. What I wanted, what I hoped for, was acknowledgement. Even a sliver of it. That the version of me they'd clung to, whispered about, quietly exiled, was wrong. You know what slaughtered me? I said, voice quieter than I intended. It's not that they believed him. It's that they wanted to. Jenna nodded slowly. Because it was easier. If you were the problem, then nothing had to change. They didn't have to question their own judgment. Didn't have to admit that maybe they backed the wrong person. I thought about the conversations I'd overheard in years past, Aunt Rosemary telling a neighbor how Harper always had a flair for the dramatic, or Joe joking that I must have been bored being a stay-at-home mom and needed some courtroom spice. They didn't say those things to be cruel. They said them because it made their world simpler. Predictable. You know, I said, when Trevor got arrested that night, the first thing I thought was, finally, someone else is going to see it. Jenna raised an eyebrow. And then I realized, it didn't matter. Not really. Not to the people who'd already made up their minds. The front door creaked open again. Aunt Rosemary poked her head out. Harper? Are you staying the night or going back with Jenna? I turned slightly toward her. Her voice was softer than usual, almost cautious. I couldn't remember the last time she'd used it with me. We'll head out soon, I said. Just getting some air. She hesitated like she wanted to say something else, then nodded and pulled the door closed again. I turned back to Jenna and shook my head. That woman could survive an apocalypse and still worry about where the linens are folded. Jenna snorted. Don't tempt her. She probably has an emergency doily stashed somewhere in that linen closet. We both laughed. It felt good. It felt earned. Lily had wandered toward the yard, stomping fresh snow into little paths. She was humming, some Christmas tune, half forgotten but sweet. Her boots crunched softly, and I watched her for a moment, this girl who'd endured more in a few years than some people do in a lifetime. You think she'll remember any of this? I asked. She will, Jenna said. But not the way you think. She'll remember you standing tall. She'll remember the truth coming out. She'll remember watching you face them with your head up. I hope so. She will, Jenna said again, firmer. We fell quiet again. The snow kept falling. The kind of slow, steady flakes that don't just dust the world, they bury it, blanket it. Erase the edges. Muffle the noise. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could actually rest inside a moment without being chased by the next crisis. When we finally went back inside, most of the table had cleared. The kitchen was half clean, and someone had started wrapping leftovers. Lily helped Jenna gather the plates. Joe was watching a football game in the den, the volume just loud enough to avoid conversation. Aunt Rosemary sat alone in the living room, a fresh drink in her hand, staring at the tree. I stood in the doorway for a second before crossing over. You always used the gold ornaments, I said, not really looking at her. Even when we begged for the colored ones. They clashed, she said automatically, her voice almost wistful. Everything has to match. Otherwise it looks off. I nodded. Still does. We sat in silence for a while, the tree lights blinking steadily. I wasn't sure if she was going to say anything else. I wasn't even sure why I'd come to her. Then, she cleared her throat again. I didn't know. I turned to her slowly. Her eyes were still fixed on the tree. I didn't know what you were doing, she said. Or why you were arrested. Or why you disappeared. I didn't disappear, I said gently. I was still here. You just stopped looking. She winced. Not visibly, but something flickered in her expression, just enough to register. Maybe, she said. Maybe I didn't want to see what I'd missed. I thought Trevor was a good man. He reminded me of your father. I let that sink in. It made sense. My father had been charming too. And emotionally absent. A man who preferred appearances to substance. I didn't want to be wrong, she added, and this time, the words felt like a confession. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman shaped by pride, and fear, and decades of hard-earned opinions. She didn't know how to be wrong gracefully. But maybe, just maybe, she was trying now. I didn't forgive her, not fully. But I nodded. That was enough. When we left that night, Jenna drove. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the lights blur past on the road, the quiet hum of the engine filling the silence. You okay? She asked again. I'm getting there, I said. The truth is, healing doesn't come all at once. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It creeps in slowly, like warmth through cold fingers. Like breath returning after being held too long. And that night, as the city lights faded behind us, I realized I wasn't done yet. There was more to face. More to say. More to reclaim. The new year came quietly. No big resolutions, no confetti. Just the soft rhythm of moving forward. Piece by piece, I started putting my life back together, not out of anger or bitterness, but out of a need to finally live on my own terms. The trial started in February. Trevor, looking thinner than I remembered, sat beside his high-priced attorney with the same smug expression I'd seen in our kitchen 100 times before. The charges were stacked high: money laundering, fraud, bribery, obstruction. My name wasn't in the headline anymore, but I sat in the front row for every session, right beside Jenna and Lily. Chief Forsyth testified. So did 2 other officers who had witnessed the sting. But it was my testimony that turned heads. I stood on that witness stand for nearly 2 hours. Calm. Steady. Every answer precise. I wasn't there for drama, I was there for truth. The real story of what I'd seen, what I'd lived through, what I'd uncovered while the people around me looked the other way. Trevor didn't look at me once. By the end of it, even his lawyer had stopped trying to twist my words. You could feel the shift in the room. The jury saw me. The judge saw me. And most importantly, I saw myself. When the verdict came back, guilty on all major counts, there was no cheer from me, no dramatic gasps from the crowd. Just a soft exhale. The kind you let out when a weight you've carried for years finally lifts off your shoulders. Trevor was sentenced to 18 years. Not enough to erase what he did. But enough to keep him out of my life. Still, the real revenge wasn't in his prison term. It came after. Because the story went public, again. But this time, I wasn't the unstable wife. This time, I was the woman who helped take down a multi-million-dollar corruption ring. The woman who got shot protecting a police chief. The woman who didn't crumble. My inbox flooded with messages. Some from reporters. Some from old coworkers who'd ghosted me years ago. But the ones that mattered most were from other women who'd been disbelieved, manipulated, dismissed. I saw myself in your story, one wrote. I left after reading about you, said another. I didn't know we were allowed to fight back. I wasn't famous. I wasn't a hero. But I was proof. Then came the call. The city's Office of Civil Oversight wanted to offer me a consulting position. They were launching a new community outreach program for survivors of domestic torment, and they wanted me on the team, not just as a case study, but as a leader. I took the job. Not because I needed the title. But because I wanted to be the person I didn't have when I needed someone. Aunt Rosemary sent a letter in April. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter. 3 pages long. She said she'd watched the trial. That she'd read the coverage. That she'd been wrong. And then she said something I never expected: I taught you how to be quiet. You taught me what courage really looks like. I didn't cry when I read it. I smiled. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means choosing peace over poison. I wrote back and thanked her. Joe sent me a friend request. I ignored it. Jenna and I got closer than ever. She stayed over some weekends just to cook and watch trashy TV with Lily and me. Lily, by the way, got into her top choice college. She told her entrance panel that her mother was the strongest person she knew. I hung the acceptance letter on the fridge next to a photo of us taken the night I was cleared. Just the two of us, holding hands in the snow, smiling without fear. One afternoon, I walked past the old police station where I had first sat across from Chief Forsyth. I found myself pausing in front of it. The memory still sharp, the cheap chairs, the coffee that tasted like ashes, the way he just listened. I sent him a thank you note. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to. He replied 2 days later, "Thank you for reminding me why I do this job. Sometimes people ask me what I would have done differently. I think about that a lot. Maybe I would have seen the signs earlier. Left sooner. Spoken louder. But maybe not. Maybe I had to walk through that fire to understand my own worth. Because revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about reclaiming your space. Living well. Thriving in the open while they're stuck behind the choices they made. I used to think justice looked like handcuffs in courtrooms. But now I know, sometimes, justice is just the sound of your own voice being heard. And the quiet joy of sitting at your own kitchen table, with no one telling you who you are anymore. I never went back to Aunt Rosemary's house for another Christmas. I didn't need to. This year, Christmas is at mine. Lily's making the playlist. Jenna's bringing wine. And me? I'm putting up the colored lights. Because they don't clash. They shine.